Hi, good afternoon and or good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Startup Immigration 101, presented by Alcorn Immigration Law. My name is Jason Kennedy with Early Growth Financial Services. I'll be your moderator for today. Just a quick couple of notes on the webinar itself. It will be approximately 60 minutes. We will be taking questions throughout the webinar with a hard stop at the conclusion. We'll have contact information made available if you have any questions after the webinar. We will be using the questions panel in your GoToWebinar console, so take a look at that. If you have questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to post those at any time and we'll get those answered for you. There will be a recording made available to all registrants within 48 hours of the conclusion of this presentation. And you can also find a recording up on our YouTube channel, Early Growth FS. So with all of the logistics out of the way, let's meet our presenter today, Sophie Alcorn from Alcorn Immigration Law. Sophie, say hello, tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what we're going to be talking about today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jason, and thank you to Early Growth Financial Services for inviting me to speak here at this webinar today. And I want to promise you that I'm going to do everything in my power to make this worthwhile so that at the end of today's talk, everybody has a clear picture of what they can do to start solving their immigration problems. So what I want to talk about today is, how many of you knew that startup founders and people on the early teams of startups can get visas and green cards to actually work at your startups. And wouldn't it be amazing to know how it's done? Because a lot of these are little known options. So I want to welcome you all to Startup Immigration 101. And let's see here with these slides. You're all at startups, I imagine. If you guys could, those of you who are out there listening right now on the live broadcast, if you could type in and let Jason know if you're working at startups or if you're other companies, and maybe a quick note about if you're interested in services for yourself or for another person at your company. And if Jason could tell me, that would be really useful so I can know a little bit more about you all and your needs. So Jason, if any of those responses come in, if you could share them with me, that would be great.
Yeah, we've got a couple that have come in already just saying they are running a startup specifically. So
Okay.
So that's where we got started right out of the gate.
And if you could tell us if you need help for yourself or somebody else, that would also be really helpful.
Now, would that be when you say yourself? Does that mean like
if you're
for your particular business? Gotcha.
Yeah, like if you're the immigrant founder and you want to figure out a way to be able to legally work at your startup as an employee and use it to get a green card or a visa, that would be like if you need it for yourself. And if you're a founder and you want to like hire a key employee to work at your startup, that would be if you need it for somebody else.
Right. It looks like we've got a little bit of both. Some for themselves, and then a couple here working with international founders that are assisting in some capacity, either at the investment level or possibly just at an advisory level.
Okay, wonderful. Well, we'll be covering things for everybody. Today we'll be focusing on the three major things that people at startups need to know about how to navigate the U.S. immigration system. So we're going to be talking about immigrating through investment, how to get a visa if you're broke, and how you can actually use your work at your startup and pivot to getting a green card through your startup later down the road. So if that all sounds good to you, is there a way for them to like give a thumbs up or something in the chat box, or a yes?
We'll move along here, and then as always, We've got some regulars that attend these webinars, but for anyone new, if you've got questions or need to stop any clarification along the way, just drop it in the questions box. We're monitoring it throughout, and we'll stop and get it cleared up.
Yeah, perfect. I'll be happy to answer questions sprinkled in throughout the presentation. So before we start, I would like you to tell you more about myself so you know why you can trust me about all of this. So my name is Sophie Alcorn, and I'm an immigration lawyer, and I stand against settling for the status quo, and I stand for diversity and the birth of new ideas that are making the world a better place. And so why do I care? Well, I am the daughter of an immigration lawyer and an immigrant. This was my parents' wedding in the early 80s. My dad was an immigration lawyer during his lifetime. He was an inspiration to me. He was an expert in his field, and he taught me what I know. And I grew up bridging two cultures. My mom is from Germany, and so I understand what it's like to have two separated families and speak two languages and be bridging these cultural differences. So growing up through my life, I always admired my dad for all the work that he did to help immigrants from around the world. And I also have experienced what it feels like to be an outsider and to feel afraid, worried, rejected, voiceless, trapped. And I know those are the feelings that a lot of my clients experience when dealing with the United States immigration system. However, I believe that immigration causes innovation, and Silicon Valley's unicorns and top startups, both here in the Bay Area and all around the country, have immigrants in their founding teams. This is crucial to developing new companies, is having the diversity of thought and of ways of thinking that can lead to growth and innovation and new ideas. And I'm an entrepreneur myself. These are my kids. I do it for them. And I founded Alcorn Immigration Law in Mountain View 2 years ago. Some pictures of the office. This was a green card approval in San Jose. We're involved a lot in the local ecosystem with tech companies, Google, LinkedIn, also with a lot of incubators and accelerators in the startup scene. I've also involved internationally in different startup hubs. This was me in India in December on Indian TV. Worked with a lot of people from Bangalore, and I have a lot of connections there. Recently, I won an award from the Mountain View Chamber of Commerce for Outstanding Young Business Person of the Year. And this was me hanging out at Startup Grind a few weeks ago. So a lot of our clients are founders, and we love working with them. On our team, we have Mary Jacobs, who's an associate attorney, Aline Kumrikian, who's our head paralegal, Irene Hong, our office manager, Salila Sukumaran, client services director. This is me. And this is our friendly office dog, Willie, who comes to help us with extremely large cases sometimes. And we've also worked with many startups, both in the Bay Area and around the world. And and our clients can be from any country, anywhere in the world, and they can come live in any part of the United States. Immigration law is federal, and so even as an attorney licensed to practice in California, I could help startup founders in New York or Austin or other tech hubs around the country. So with that, let's delve into our topics for today. So the first thing we're going to be covering is immigration for investors. So this would be if an individual personally owns money that they are investing into a United States business in order to get a visa or a green card as an investor. So for this to make sense, I need to give you, oh, that came out really bright. I need to give you a little overview of the immigration process. And it's hard to see it in the slide, but there are three main categories of people who are in the United States from an immigration perspective. So first would be people who are here as non-immigrants. So those are people who have gotten a temporary visa to come into the country. So some examples would be students in F1 status, skilled workers who have H-1B status, J-1 trainees, or even B-1, B-2 visitors. So what all of these people have in common is that all of these non-immigrant, all of these visas and temporary statuses are usually for people who are only coming to the country temporarily for a short trip. And for the case of a student or a visitor, they've proved to the U.S. consulate in their home country that they aren't planning on staying here permanently, that they're just coming for a short trip, they're going to do their thing here, and then they're going to leave and go back home. There is an exception for certain types of visas that allow dual intent. So there might be people on the call who have H-1B status. That is special because with an H-1B, you're allowed to either want to stay here temporarily, or you can also desire to stay here permanently and to get a green card. But all of these are temporary short-term statuses, usually for a couple of years. You have to keep renewing them. You have to get new visas and your passports in order to come back in. And with most of all these non-immigrant statuses, you are allowed to switch from one category to another while you're in the United States without leaving. One exception would be if somebody comes from like Japan or a lot of the European countries, there's something called the Visa Waiver Program, or ESTA. So that would be for somebody coming as a tourist or a business visitor for up to 90 days, but they are not allowed to stay longer, and they're not allowed to change status in the United States. They have to leave, get a new visa, and come back in. Okay, so that's non-immigrant visas and non-immigrant statuses. The next distinction, the next group in this, there's like three categories. So the next one is permanent residence. It's the same thing as having a green card. So green card is just the common slang nickname. Back in the olden days, the cards were green. Then for 40 or 50 years, the cards were not green, but they still called it a green card. And now the new cards are green again, so that's convenient. And if you're here as a non-immigrant in the first category and you want to stay and become a permanent resident, then the process that you go through is called adjustment of status. So you often hear people either through marriage to a U.S. citizen, or through their job, or through your startup. If you have somebody here who's a temporary non-immigrant and you're sponsoring them for a green card in the United States, that process is called adjustment of status. And usually for most categories, you just get a full-fledged green card straight out, but if it's based on investment, which we'll cover in a minute, or based on a new marriage to a U.S. citizen, it could be that your green card is temporary and conditional and only valid 2 years, and then you have to go through another process to make it last a lifetime like everybody else's green cards do. status is for your lifetime. The card itself usually needs to be renewed every 10 years. And if you have a green card, you can live in the United States, you can work for anybody or yourself, and the only way they can take it away from you is if you do something bad or if you stay too long out of the United States, and then there would be some sort of deportation trial. Okay, so if you're here as a permanent resident and you don't want to have any risk of deportation and you're committed to living in the United States and you want to be able to vote and you want to be able to serve on juries, then you become a citizen. And the process of becoming a citizen is called naturalization. And you can do that if you've had a green card for 5 years. Unless you're married to a U.S. citizen, then you only have to wait 3 years. There are other requirements as well about the amount of time that you've spent living in the United States, and you need to have good moral character as well. But the end goal for a lot of people is becoming a United States citizen, and it can be a decades-long process, starting from having a student visa. A lot of my clients have come as students to get a bachelor's degree, and then they maybe get a master's degree, and then they can work and get a work permit on F1 OPT, which is valid usually for a year, but they can extend it for another 2 years if they're in STEM field, science, technology, education, or math. And then the goal is to get an H-1B visa or another type of status, and then eventually to get a green card, and then after that citizenship, and then you can help your parents come. So, people work on this for years, trying to lay the groundwork and have a smooth path to avoid disruption, because, it's like building a long chain of dominoes, and you don't want any of them to topple, or else the whole thing can be ruined. So, okay, so first we're going to talk about the E-2 visa. And for those of you guys who are listening who are from India or China, give me 3 minutes to explain this. It doesn't apply to you unless you're hiring people for whom it applies to. The E-2 visa is a temporary non-immigrant status for investors to be able to invest in a United States company, come here, live here, work at the company, and grow the company. There are a lot of countries that are eligible, but it's kind of random. If you want to see the full list, you can Google E-2 treaty countries, and you'll find yourself looking at a State Department list. Some of the countries that are included are Germany, Japan, Mexico, Turkey. One that's kind of a surprise for a lot of people is Iran. Even though we have the embargo, there is an E-2 treaty investor visa available for Iranians, but not India and not China. So, I was recently talking to a client about setting up everything for the E-2 visa, and he was asking me what's involved. And it's quite an involved process, but if you can get it together to be committed to the process and organized enough about getting all the right documents, it's fairly straightforward. It's not super subjective on the part of the bureaucrat, the consular officer, making the decision. So, for example, you need to show that you personally have earned or legally received the money that you're investing. It could even be as a gift, but they don't want any criminally tainted money going into this. So you have to prove how you received the money and that it's yours. You have to open a United States company, get everything legit with the incorporation, and you have to show that the company is at least owned 50% by people from the same country as you. So, and that's required throughout. So that can be a problem for people who want to raise and pass out equity. It can dilute their ownership so that people from their country own less than 50%. So at that time when that happens, it means you need to switch to another visa status. But you show that the company is incorporated, you show it's legit, you get all the right business licenses, you set up a corporate bank account, you transfer, I recommend at least $100,000 of your own money into the corporate bank account. We create a very detailed business plan for the next 5 years. And this is very different from a business plan that angel investors and venture capitalists want to see. From an immigration perspective, what they're looking for is 30 to 60 pages of comprehensive spreadsheets with detailed financial projections, because they want to see how this company is going to become profitable, and it needs to be very clear, because this visa is for people whose companies are not only going to have mere marginal profits. It's supposed to be big. It's supposed to be substantial. But you know, once we get all of these papers together, and it's a fat package of documents, but it's doable, and then you would usually go to your home country's embassy for a visa interview, and my clients have been very successful with getting those. One interesting variation is if you have a valuation that shows that your percentage of the company is worth $100,000, even if you haven't put that money into the company, even if you put less in, it might be possible in some cases to be able to get an E-2 visa based on your equity and the value of your ideas and your inventions, even if you can't put in $100K from your own money. Okay, that's the temporary E-2 investor status. Now, if you're from China or India, come back, because the next thing that I'll talk about, the investor green card, applies to everybody from all over the world. So, I need a sip of water. That's a lot of talking. Any questions so far? Is this making sense to you guys?
We've got a couple of questions, not around the E-2 visa specifically, and so I'll throw one of these out there, and you can let me know if we're going to cover it later. But someone asked specifically about the O1 visa. Do you see that a lot, kind of in the startup game? And what is there? The question around it is the O1 visa a dual intent? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I'll be getting to that. Thank you. That's a great question, and I am going to be covering that in a little bit. So
nice. And I've had a couple other questions. Kind of, I think we'll kind of nip it in the bud here along the way. But for the E-2 visa, you mentioned there were some kind of requirements to maintain that visa. And this kind of more, I'll try to generalize some of these questions. But are there any typical pitfalls that you see people holding or looking for these visas that they fall into? Obviously, like kind of in the non-criminal category, you know, not actually causing trouble. But is there like letting something lapse, or not submitting renewal paperwork, or being out of the country too long? Like, what is there one particular thing that you see over and over? Like, hey guys, like, be mindful of this.
Right, that's a great question. So, and Jason, your instincts are totally correct. Don't commit any crimes. That's really bad. You can get deported. You might never be able to come back in. But startup founders are usually not going around doing violent or nefarious activities, so we probably don't have to worry about that right now. I would say the biggest problem that people have is overstaying their visas. Once you've overstayed, it is excruciatingly painful to try to fix the situation. So if you have a scenario coming where you can see like, oh my God, my visitor status is going to expire in a month, and I don't know what to do, you definitely should talk to a lawyer. You can reach out to us. You know, at a minimum, we can try to extend your visitor visa for another 6 months. But I was just talking to some business owners in my office, and their visitor status, because when you come into the United States, you know, you might have a 10-year visa, but that doesn't mean you can stay for 10 years. You're allowed to stay based on the I-94 stamp that they put in your passport at the border or at the airport, and that tells you the end date of when you need to leave by. So I was just talking to some business owners who have the 100K and who have a company in another country, but they overstayed, and they just like didn't know. They didn't think it was a big deal, but it's actually a huge problem because not only did they overstay a little bit, they've overstayed now seven months. And there's something in immigration law called the 3-year, 10-year bar. And if you're here more than 180 days and less than 1 year without status as an overstay, and you leave, you can't come back in for 3 years. And if you're here for 1 year or more as an overstay and you leave, you can't come back in for 10 years unless you have a very specific waiver based on your family members suffering extreme hardship without you, which is an incredibly high standard to meet. And the other thing is, once you've overstayed, you can't switch to another category in the United States. So you're here, you're stuck, you have to leave in order to come back, but once you leave, you incur this 3-year or 10-year bar. So this is a huge, huge problem for a lot of people, and it's actually really simple to address if you decide. All you need to decide is that you're not going to, you know, be like an ostrich sticking your head in a hole, like, oh, maybe if I ignore it, it'll work out. It can't be that big of a deal. No, it's actually a huge problem. The only way to fix this is for somebody who's truly in love with a U.S. citizen and tries to get married and get a green card that way. But everybody else who has, you know, business immigration as their options, you can't unring that bell. So that's an excellent question. Okay, so with that, we're going to move on to our next topic, which is EB-5 green cards. And these are green cards for investors based on investment. And the monetary amounts are high, but, you know, Jason, I know you work with a lot of successful startups at Early Growth Financial Services. So even if you feel like you don't have the money for this now, keep it in mind, because one day if your company has an IPO or an M&A or something and you get a bunch of cash, this could be a way for you to get a green card. So the Investor Green Card program started in the 90s, and it applies to people from India and China, any country in the world, and it's really cool because you can leverage your money to get a green card within a couple years. The way the program started, it was for people who were investing $1 million in a new United States company that would then go on to create jobs for 10 American workers. And this is one of those where the initial green card is valid 2 years, and then you prove that you actually invested the money and you actually hired the workers. You get the conditions removed, and then you get the full-fledged lifetime green card. There's an exception that got created about 20 years ago, which lowers the investment amount, and it's called the EB-5 Regional Center Program. So, you know, a lot of startup founders don't want to be passive investors because they have the entrepreneurial spirit and they feel like, no, if I'm putting my money into some company, I know how to best invest that. I don't want to be a passive investor. But if you have $500,000 of cash laying around, you can passively invest into a regional center, which is supposed to create economic development for community or geographical area in the United States, and you can use that to get a green card. So it's pretty cool. If this is an option for anybody on the call, I would recommend looking into it as soon as possible because the program is scheduled to end on April 28th. And I do think it will be renewed, but I think all the financial levels, all the financial amounts are going to be increased. So right now it's 500 or $1 million. In the future, based on what Congress is saying, it's likely that it's going to be $800,000 or $1.2 million. So that's like a 60% increase for the cheaper option. So, you know, if that's a possibility for you, your time is running out, and you need to look into it as soon as possible. So, and for the rest of you, I wish you a lot of success with your startup, so that will be a possibility for you one day. Okay, so I hope that information about investment options benefited you. Before I move on from investment, are there any questions about the E-2 visa or the EB-5 green card or other questions relating to investment opportunities?
We've got one question that I think is a little bit in this area. Obviously, I'm not the expert, so I'll throw it out there to you, and we can answer it now, or we can defer to a little bit later on. But we've got a company that's looking to incorporate in the UK and as well as an affiliate in the US in order to essentially funnel revenue made in the US back to the UK home base. But if these guys are going to be in the US, does that have any? Are they going to run into any roadblocks when it comes time to get their immigration paperwork in order?
Okay, wonderful, wonderful question. Great. I will address that momentarily. Thank you.
Nice.
So that is actually the perfect segue into my next section. So, you know, if you don't actually have very much cash lying around, what are some alternative visas you can use through, you know, your startup as a vehicle to get you visas and non-immigrant status? So there are a lot of options, and I'm going to try to cover as many as possible, but there are a lot of details. Each of these has its own very, very specific, narrow requirements. So, you know, a lot of people find that when we sit down for a consultation, it's much easier because I can tell them what to focus on. Otherwise, the alphabet soup can get really overwhelming. So I have a lot of clients who are startup founders, and they often come to me as visitors or students in OPT, and they want to know, you know, what can they do? So this happened recently for one guy who was incorporating a Delaware S Corp and getting it, but you know, to have the company headquartered in California, and he wanted to know. He was on OPT, optional practical training, which is the 1-year possibility after you have an F1 student visa and you graduate. So we were talking about what are all the options. And so The first one that we were talking about is, okay, the H-1B visa. And this is for people who have at least a bachelor's degree or equivalent amount of experience in a particular field, and they're coming to the United States to work at a company, to do a job, a professional job, not like an administrative support job, in their field, and they're getting sponsored by their company. So we were talking about the H-1B, and time is running out for the H-1B. The next lottery cycle starts in 2 weeks. So if this is something that is interesting for you, you really need to get moving on it like today, because crucial documents need to be filed like tomorrow at the latest. And there's a risk that they might not even get counted, that it might not make it in time for the lottery. But it's still, I would say today, it's absolutely still a possibility. The thing with the H-1B is there is a lottery, and we don't know how many people are going to be applying this year because of a lot of the political changes that have been going on. So last year, there were over 250,000 applicants for 85,000 spots. It's a random lottery. However, 20 or 25,000 of the H-1Bs are set aside for people who got master's degrees in the United States. So, you know, I presented this to that startup founder who I was talking about, and he wasn't willing to risk it. And I said, look, even if you're the founder of your company, you can still apply for an H-1B for yourself to work at the company. You just need like somebody on the board of directors who can write you an offer letter so that you can actually work there, and then it's fine even if you own equity. And a lot of startup founders do that when they've been working at a company and they already have an H-1B, and they transfer their H-1B to be able to work for their startup. He was like, no, there's too much risk. I was like, well, we don't know what's happening with Trump. All of the big like Indian consulting companies that file for 10 or 20,000 H-1Bs, they're all scared that they're going to have to pay, you know, tons of money, or their business is going to be cut by Congress, outlawing them from using the H-1B. So I think they're all kind of hesitant and applying for less than usual this year. He was like, no, it's too much risk. I don't have enough money. Maybe I'll try again in the future, but I don't want to make that commitment right now. Like, oh, okay. So, you know, then I told him about this other program, which is an H-1B, but it's to remove startup founders from the lottery to be able to get a visa without the hassle, the worry, and the risk of going through the lottery. And this is something called the Global Entrepreneur in Residence Program. It's a nonprofit that is starting entrepreneurship mentoring programs at universities across the country. It's established in Massachusetts. They recently opened at San Jose State University in Silicon Valley. I think they're in talks or completed with Colorado and Alaska. And this is where the university is saying, please, we want our students to learn how to be entrepreneurs. We want startup founders to have a part-time job at our university. The rest of the time, they can get another H-1B to work for their own startup, but we want them to come to our campus for a certain amount of time each week and teach our students about entrepreneurship. And the beauty of this is that once you do that, universities are not, they have an exception from the H-1B lottery. So you don't have to go through the cap. You can become H-1B exempt, and then you can tack on another H-1B to work at your own startup after you get this first H-1B through the university. So I told this to the client, and he was like, oh, I don't think I'm good enough yet. I don't think I have enough traction. I don't think that's going to work for me. And he didn't take that opportunity either. Okay, so somebody asked a question earlier about the O1A. And this is the visa for people with extraordinary ability who are at the very top of their field in the entire world. And this is not like engineering. It would be like, I don't know, fluid dynamics. It's like a narrow subfield. It's still a legitimate field of inquiry in either academia or business. Entrepreneurialism could be a field for extraordinary ability. And yeah, startups can absolutely get O1A visas for their very talented employees. In order to qualify, there are 8 criteria set out by statute, and you have to prove that you meet at least 3 of them in order to demonstrate your extraordinary ability. So if somebody's coming from academia, it's possible to do this with peer-reviewed publications, doing peer reviewing, having your work cited, winning awards, fellowships, grants. If you're not in academia, this could be shown through key positions at distinguished organizations, earning a high salary, having newspaper articles written about you. And it's really an art to crafting these packages because it's so intensive and about this one particular person's story of success. But I thought this client who I'm talking about, he has a lot of really good accomplishments, but he does not have enough money in the bank to be able to show that he can actually pay himself, have his company pay himself as an O1A employee. So, and he like, I don't know, he was too afraid and was having issues getting it together because he wasn't committed to going for it. And so the O1A wasn't an option. Now, there was also another question, Jason, that somebody had asked about 2 affiliate companies between the United States and the United Kingdom. And this is also a wonderful option for startups. Usually, the scenario that I see with a lot of my clients is people are coming to the United States from foreign countries where they've already incorporated and started their companies, and they've been working there, and they have customers, and they're producing a product or a service that's actually starting to make money, and they want to be able to come to the United States to open up a U.S. office in order to raise funding and to expand. And typically, the way it works out best for investors and for immigration is to create a United States company, make the foreign company, so in this case the United Kingdom company, a subsidiary, transfer the intellectual property to the United States company, and then the United States company can sponsor people for L1A visas as managers and executives to come here and work for the United States company. The minimum amount of business legal work to get this set up for immigration purposes is somewhat minimal, but by the time you're actually ready to get investor funding in the United States, it's a bit complicated to do all of that commercial business legal work about the, there can be like reverse mergers involved, and you have to get the intellectual property assigned to the U.S. company. But the L1A visa is awesome. You must show that during the last 3 years, you spent 1 year working as an employee of the company full-time. And it's ideal if you have a regular recurring payroll where you can just show your pay stubs. I know in Mexico, I have Mexican startup founders who are my clients, and their Mexican business law says that owners can't be employees, so they don't have pay stubs. I did this recently for somebody from Palestine who was only getting profits from the owner's draw of profits from the company. We managed to succeed even though there weren't regular pay stubs. So this is a really cool option. Also, down the road, once your company is established, it has a very direct path to getting a green card. So that's another benefit to you. But, you know, this guy this potential client who I was telling all these options to, he didn't have a foreign company, so it wasn't an option for him. So then we were discussing the possibility of a J1 program, and this is for, it can be for a lot of reasons, but J1 is for cultural exchange. So the basic idea is that people are coming to the United States to gain skills that they're then going to use and take back to their home country to improve their home countries. So people who recently graduated from college can get J1s for 12 months to have an internship in the United States, and people with a college degree or professional experience can come and do a J1 training program, which can be valid for 18 months. So this is really cool if you have like a key employee who's, like I have one company that's a startup and they've been using a contractor in Brazil and they're sponsoring him for a J1 training program to come here for 18 months. And you know, he's going to get a lot of experience and learn a lot through this opportunity, and it's really going to help improve their working relationship by having them all in the same place. So it's a good option. It's not great for the founder, though, because you're supposed to be being trained. So that didn't work for this one client. You know, another thing that people who are in student status can do, obviously there's the 1-year OPT work permit. If you're in science, technology, education, and math, there's the 24-month STEM extension. For the first year, you can work anywhere or be self-employed. For the STEM extension, you have to work for an employer that is part of the E-Verify program, which is for I-9 for employment verification for companies. And you have to have a detailed training program. But that is definitely something that we can do for startup founders, or you know, for people for anybody working at a startup. It can be a little bit of a pain to get the company in E-Verified, but we can totally take care of it, and that's a way to easily get another 2 years for these people who are very skilled software engineers and in other positions. Okay. Next, I want to cover the TN. I'll just say a few things about this. This is the visa for people from Canada and Mexico to work professionally in the United States. There's a list of about 30 job categories that qualify. So if somebody's from Canada, they have a special option. That's what you need to remember. There's a lot.
Real quick question.
Great.
Real quick question on this one, because I know personally a few folks that actually immigrated to Canada first before coming into the U.S. Are they able to leverage this, or is there like a separate process altogether?
Absolutely. A lot of startup founders and a lot of software companies that are in the Silicon Valley are opening offices in Vancouver, and I'm actually creating a program to help people who have run out of options in the United States be able to go to Canada, get valid Canadian immigration, and then use that to pivot, and when they're ready, be able to come back to the United States. So that's something exciting that's in the works that I'm looking forward to being able to offer in a few months. But absolutely, and that is, you know, it's complicated, but also very doable. But I think, you know, the most important takeaway is don't just do nothing and hope that it's going to work out. You know, these are very, very complicated matters. Yes, I'm the mother of an immigrant, but I'm from the United States. English is my first language. I'm an attorney, and the law is still very complicated for me to understand sometimes. And people often try to DIY their immigration, and it can lead to huge problems with, lifetime consequences, including deportation, and that's the worst. No, it's almost the worst. Trying to figure out which is worse. Okay, being deported is awful. Being deported and not being able to ever come back is really awful. But, I think that what's also really terrible is living here with the uncertainty of not knowing what your next move is going to be. And that uncertainty can be paralyzing. So, this is where I want you guys to be, open for business. And so what we need to do is be able to create a plan that you can commit to. And unlike that guy I was telling you about who was just like hemming and hawing and no, it's too expensive and no, I want to wait, if you snooze, you lose. And people say the U.S. immigration system is broken, and yes, it has a lot of flaws. But the reality is that there are a lot of creative solutions that educated, intelligent, highly motivated people do have at their disposal to take advantage of. So, okay. There's a gift from President Obama right before he left office. And this is for startup founders. And this is the third thing I wanted to cover. It's a green card for startup founders. Just looking at time, I'm not going to go into it in a ton of depth, but basically, this is the EB2 NIW type of green card, which stands for Employment-Based Second Preference National Interest Waiver. The waiver part means, you guys may have heard of like big companies sponsoring employees for green cards. The first step of that process traditionally is testing the U.S. labor market. What that actually means is recruiting to find a replacement for the foreigner to see if any Americans are able to do this job. With the EB2 NIW startup green card, you get to bypass that whole recruitment process. So it's really awesome because it can save a lot of time. And it's also great because that recruitment process usually fails if the person who wants the job is an owner of the company. But if you avoid that, you can self-petition. So the three requirements are that you have to be doing work of substantial merit and national importance. So it has to be valuable, it has to be worthwhile. I have a startup that's doing marijuana research. We're going to have to look closely at whether they can qualify for this. The person has to be well positioned to continue to do the work in this field and at this startup. And the work has to be beneficial to the United States or to the world. And, this green card category actually existed for a long time. The new update is that the case law specifically applies to startup founders who are experts in the field of entrepreneurialism. So if you have a successful startup that's gotten funding, that has a product that's creating jobs, and you don't have those O1A criteria for extraordinary ability, this is a great pivot and a great way to get a green card anyway. Okay, real quick, this is bonus material. This is number four that I'm throwing in addition to the three categories that I wanted to cover. July 20th, we think the International Entrepreneur Parole Status is going to go live, unless the president decides to cancel it. But everything is in place. It's a brand new status for startup founders. You have to, and for this to happen, you need to have a recently opened company that was founded in the last 5 years, and the founder has to own at least 10%, and the company must have received $250,000 from U.S. investors or $100,000 in government grants in order to qualify. And the benefits are that the founder can live here, the spouse can come, the kids can come, the spouse can get a work permit, and it initially lasts for 30 months, and then you can be eligible for a 30-month extension. So I think this is the most valuable for people who don't have an H-1B yet. If you have an H-1B, you have better options. But if you don't have an H-1B or an O-1A and you're stuck about moving forward, this is definitely something that can help you break through. So, you know, my team and I try to creatively and strategically think about using all of the options available to help you. You're not just a client, you're a person with your own unique story and qualifications, and we really try to focus on that. And, you know, we use creative problem solving because we really value all of the work that you guys are doing. I mean, startups, you're growing the United States economy, you're innovating, and you're changing people's lives, and that's really valuable. So, okay, so, you know, if you've found value in this webinar, the next option, or where to go from here if you want more information, would be to schedule a consultation. And you know, if this overview is helpful, then just wait and see. We'll do a personalized review of your options, and I think that can help you even more. You know, and I talk to a lot of people, and not everybody is a fit. So, you know, that's one of the things that we're figuring out. Is there anything we can do to help you? And, you know, do we have the space to take on another client? Can we serve you? Maybe another lawyer would be better for your situation. But even if that's the case, you know, I know a lot of immigration lawyers, and so you're going to end up with a much better match for yourself if you ask us instead of just going online and Googling or looking at Yelp reviews or Avvo reviews. And I love speaking with you guys in these, we love speaking with you guys in these strategy sessions and consultations, and I love learning about all of the work that you do with your companies. So for people on this call, on this webinar today, I know some people are probably going to be watching the replay in the future on YouTube, but if you are listening to the webinar right now live, I have something special that I set aside for you guys because I really appreciate Jason and Early Growth Financial Services. I reserved 9 consultations this week for people from this call, and so, but you have to let us know right now if that's something you want to do within the next hour. So we'll be able to take 9, and we'll have a wait list for 3. And the benefit of that is we're going to have free consultations for you if you're participating. And normally, you know, we charge half an hour attorney's hourly rate, but that's something that we would like to provide to you guys. And then if you hear about this later, or if you're not ready for a you know, if you're not ready to commit yet to a consultation, then but you want more information, I have an infographic chart that's very detailed and covers a lot of these immigration options, temporary versus permanent, requirements, timeline, process. And so if you email Salila@alcornimmigrationlaw.com and let her know either consultation and or newsletter, options chart, then we can get that to you. So thank you, Jason, so much. And I want to be cognizant of the time, but I really appreciate you inviting me, and I'm really looking forward to speaking with people.
Yeah, Sophie, that's a gracious offer. Thanks so much for putting that together for our listeners today. I definitely encourage you guys to check that out if that's a discussion you need to be having right now. So just a quick reminder before we wrap up, Sophie's team members got a contact information there if you guys need to reach out further down the road. This will be provided in a recording. I know this had a lot of interesting tidbits. We had a lot of great questions, so you guys will get a recording so that you can kind of review back as needed when the time merits. So, Sophie, just thanks again for joining us today. Any parting words before we sign off?
It's been a pleasure working with you. I think your team offers a lot of valuable services. I wish all of my startup founder clients could get it together to get organized and use the services that you provide, because people who are committed to really making this work, if you're committed, anything is possible. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks again, and thanks to all of you that joined us today, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. Bye.